Welcome, everybody, to Buddhist Center Sunday. Here we are again. We've made it. So many of us have been many Sundays in front of Kensur Geshe Wandak and heard the Lam Rim so many times. And I feel so blessed to have been such an active participant in that process. To try to understand this stuff without a qualified teacher can be a little bit daunting. If we were just kind of left on our own with a pile of books and nowhere to, not really a clue on where to begin or which book would be best to study. There's so many different books, and we're so fortunate to have Rinpoche kind of point us right to the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa as kind of the main text that we could see all of the incredible texts of the Indian Pandits in, and all of the sutras and so forth of Buddha Shakyamuni. And if we look at it in terms of that little section at the end of the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, we could say that it includes all of the tantras also in a very summarized way. But we know that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Tantric Path as well in a separate volume. But really, when we look at the Lam Rim Chemo, it's incredible how thorough it is and how well thought out it is, and how it really includes everything that one would need to know in order to go from a state like I'm in to a state of perfection. So there's a very big gap between those two places, and somehow I have to get from one side of that gap to the other. The place where I'm sitting now with all of the defilements and anger and attachment and ignorance and all of this kind of yuckiness that is in my mind, but isn't my mind. So it can be removed. My mind is in the nature of clear light and unsullied, luckily. So therefore, because it's empty of inherent existence, it doesn't have some stuck place that it can't mature. And that maturation can take place in a little way, where we can become a little more mature in our lives, or it can take place in a very grand way. And that's the way that Buddha Shakyamuni presented it. Buddha Shakyamuni said that we could take this mind to a perfect state of mind, to a state of omniscience, to a state of perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect wisdom, perfect power, perfect skillful means, that we didn't really have a cap or a ceiling to how far we could take this mind. I mean, if you call perfection the ceiling, then we could say that there is a ceiling, but we can expand this mind to be able to connect with and help all sentient beings, and to go from the place where my mind is now, that's very closed and very tight, to a place where I could really connect with every sentient being in the universe in a meaningful way to help them. It's amazing that we have very specific stages that are written, and Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Damdu, all these kind teachers have taught us and teach us so well what we need to do as practitioners to make that kind of gap get smaller and smaller and smaller to the place where we become that perfectly enlightened being called Buddha. So very exciting that we have the opportunity to be in this space right now. We have the opportunity to learn more and more and more. And when we learn more and invest our minds in this material, it really pays off because it will allow us to eventually achieve that incredible state of perfection that the Buddha has. But before we get started, let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture that we always get into in order to kind of clear our minds and be able to get into a place where we can set a proper motivation. We know that all of the great masters have said that body posture plays a very big role as a support in our process of meditation. And the 7-point Vairocana posture is an amazing way that we can, set up a good basis for our meditation from a physical standpoint that will then act as a support as we're able to maintain our mental meditation longer and longer. We won't be distracted by the physicality of our body, and it will actually serve as a support because all of our winds and channels and our blood will be flowing exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And therefore, when our body's in that state, it doesn't become a distraction for our mental consciousness that we're really using to focus on what our objects of observation are, because it's our mind that has to mature. It's our mind that will move on to the next life. Our physical body will not. We have subtle aggregates that will move on, that will allow for our future aggregates, but these parts right here will not move on. They obviously, at the time of our death, our mind, our mental consciousness separates from them. But in the meantime, while it's not separated, while the mental consciousness is abiding in this hotel, as Rinpoche would say, this hotel that's named Jeff with these parts, my mental consciousness is abiding in it. Eventually, this will become an older and older hotel if I'm lucky and don't die prematurely. And then I will move out of this hotel into a new hotel, a new set of aggregates among the five. And the thing that goes forward is this mental consciousness. So in the meantime, while I have this hotel called, we're naming Jeff, it can serve to help me mature my mind, and it will become less of a distraction in my mind's maturation if I can somehow link the two. So this is the reason, one of the reasons anyway, that we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture over and over again. And then we add the 8th point, sometimes it's called, of breathing. So we're going to get into that 7-point Vairocana posture. I've gone over so many times, so I won't go over the details of it right now. And then we're going to breathe in through our nose and breathe out through our nose, and then we're going to count that breath. So we're breathing in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm all the way in a very natural fashion, not in a very hurried way, or not in too slow of a way that we feel like we're drowning. We want it to just be in a very natural fashion, which can become hard when you start to focus on the breath, because you start to try to manipulate it. But what you're trying to do is really breathe in that natural fashion, but bring the breath all the way to the top, turn it around very gently, and then breathe out, and then count 1. And then in your front generation, you'll have Buddha Shakyamuni in your mental consciousness that you're imagining about an arm length away, imagining at your eye height, maybe the size of your thumb or so, maybe 2 inches, beautiful, glorious, radiant, but in a static position. It's very important when we use a focal object, when we're trying to gain calm abiding, that focal object remains static. It is not animated, isn't moving around. So when we're visualizing something in the front, we want to, whatever object of observation we choose, in this case, we're using Buddha Shakyamuni, but you can use other deities. You could use the syllable ah. You can use so many different things, but you should pick one and stick with it. And the great texts say that if we visualize an image of Buddha Shakyamuni, not only are we going to be able to gain calm abiding, a fixed state of mind, but we're also accumulating merit, and we're connecting to Buddha Shakyamuni and the teachings. So it has a dual benefit. It isn't just the benefit of being able to calm our minds down to the point where we'd have a physical and mental pliancy that then gives rise from a kind of quiescent point, a place of equanimity, to what's called calm abiding, or shamatha. Anyway, let's get into this posture. Again, the 7-point Vairocana posture, and we're going to breathe in and out, and we're going to count that breath. And we're going to visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation form static, or whatever other front generation visualization you want to do that you feel will help you to get shamatha. If that's too much, just do the breathing in and out and the counting. If the counting's a distraction, just focus on the breath. So let's get started with that, and then we'll set our motivation from there. We're so fortunate to have this human basis, a basis from which we can engage in the practice of the Dharma. We're so fortunate to have met with Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. So incredible. We know about the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, where Buddha presented the Four Noble Truths, stated that this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, and this is the superior truth of path. Our teachers have been so careful to identify what each of these mean, identifying the truth of suffering and the various types of suffering that we have to experience. We can meditate on these various types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering, and convince ourselves of our need to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. Buddha was so kind to tell us exactly why we suffer, showing us that all effects are dependent upon their causes. And if we find exactly what the cause of anything is and stop it, that which it gives rise to won't occur. The Buddha stated that the origin of our suffering is self-grasping ignorance. It gives rise to all kinds of negative states of mind, inappropriate attention, the afflictions, contaminated karmas. And then as a result of these contaminated actions that we engage in, we have to suffer. So it's by getting rid of the self-grasping ignorance that we can get rid of all of our suffering. Buddha stated in the third noble truth that it was possible to get rid of all of our suffering. And in the fourth noble truth told us that it was by relying upon a path, the superior path of wisdom. We're so fortunate to know what that superior path of wisdom is, because Arya Nagarjuna came into our world and clearly showed us the middle way consequence view. Showed us that all phenomena lack true establishment, lack intrinsic existence, lack objective existence, clarified the second turning of the wheel of Dharma for all of us, where the Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. It was so profound and so difficult to understand. But Arya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and all of these holy beings came into our world and clarified the exact meaning of that path of wisdom that we would need to engage in order to get rid of the origin of suffering. We're so blessed to have this in our world. Rejoice in this fact. Rejoice in the fact that we've heard of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma and have heard of this Buddha nature that we all possess. We will all become Buddha. We have this proliferating Buddha nature, this mind that can transform from the state of negativity that it currently resides in to a state of perfection. And it can do that because of the natural Buddha nature, which is the emptiness of the proliferating Buddha nature, the emptiness of our mind. The emptiness of our mind right now is the exact same nature as the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. Yet our mind moves from suffering to suffering, and the Buddha's mind moves from bliss to bliss. Both of these things occurring from emptiness and dependent origination. We're so fortunate that our mind can mature to the point where we have fearlessness and bliss, because we can remove the afflictive obstructions that cause all of our fears, and we can remove the obstructions to omniscience that cause us to not be omniscient, that cause us to not have bliss. All sentient beings equally want this type of happiness that we seek out. Everybody wants happiness, 100% happiness. Nobody wants to suffer. Everyone equally feels this way. All of the people that I love in my life have to experience this suffering that Buddha showed us over and over and over again. All of these 8 and 6 and 3 types of suffering that are so horrendous when we really analyze them, everyone has to experience. All sentient beings have the same pain. And in order for us to truly become the fully realized being that is called Buddha, fully woken up and open in terms of omniscience, we have to learn to put others' needs before our own, and have to understand that all sentient beings are equally important. Recognizing how important everyone is. Everyone's pain hurts. Everyone feels good when they're happy, and everyone wants to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Just like you. So many people don't have access to these teachings. So many people are so lost because they have no idea why they suffer. But the Buddha was so kind to come in this world, and we were so lucky to meet with these teachings to find out the exact answer to the question of why do I suffer? Why don't I have bliss? All the great bodhisattvas learned to cherish others more than themselves. And once they came to the conclusion that others' needs were more important than their own, and they brought on this extraordinary attitude where they said, I'll take on my task of freeing each and every sentient being. And they recognized that the only way that they could do that was to become a Buddha. Just like those bodhisattvas, we have to realize this. We, through the process of recognizing the need for our Buddhahood, we will act just like bodhisattvas once we get that beautiful mind of bodhicitta, which puts others' needs before our own. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni becomes very animated, that he's no longer in a static position. He's animated, fully radiant, light rays and so forth coming off of him, smiling, so happy that we're here engaging in the Dharma. And imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni has been containing the entire merit field. Imagine that now Buddha Shakyamuni explodes into the whole merit field. Buddha Shakyamuni is still there, so animated, but from Buddha Shakyamuni comes all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Imagine that they're all there in the space in front of you. Imagining His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Khenso Geshe Wandak, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo and Gen Gyatso, and imagining Demalocha Rinpoche, imagining Umzala Geshe Aga and Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, imagining Jeffrey Hopkins and Lama Alan Wallace, all these holy beings like Thupten Chodron and Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Shadow Rinpoche, imagining all these gurus, all these lamas that we've been affected by so much are in the space in front of us, and so happy that we're engaging in exactly what they came to teach us to do, and that was learn more Dharma and learn how to practice in a more thorough fashion. And they're so proud and so happy that we've come here today to do this. Now imagine that all of the extensive deeds lineages in the space in front of you passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, imagining all these holy beings like Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha, imagining the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Arya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Buddha Palita and Arya Deva, Buddha Palita and Shanti Deva and Baba Vega and Shantarashita, imagining all of these holy beings are here. Again, Lama Salingpa and Lord Atisha, imagining the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara and Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Marpa Lotsao and Milarepa and Gampopa, imagining these holy beings are all here to witness and to just rejoice in the fact that we're engaging in this practice today. Imagining Lama Atisha passing it down to Dron Tompa, that holy lay person who held the entire Lamarin lineage and the three Kadampa lineages, and all the great masters of the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Galup order, imagining beings like Padmasambhava and Sakya Pandita and Karmapas and Lama Tsongkhapa and Kirtip J and Joseph J and Jayan Sheba and Basuchuji Jetson and Gonju Jimmy Wampo, Jayan Gabi Lodru, imagining Janja Rupi Dorje, the seventh Dalai Lama, all these beings that we've been so connected to and heard so many teachings from. We're so fortunate. So many beings, of the billions of beings, such a small 0.00000 something of a percent have access to these teachings of billions of beings. And we've had access to these teachings through the Great Treatise and the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, through all of these holy lamas who've taught us so many texts and so many commentaries and sutras and so forth. We're so fortunate to have connected to these things, and it's such a rare occurrence. Imagine all of the highest Yoga Tantra deities, Yogic Tantra deities, Performance Tantra deities, Action Tantra deities, all of the 35 Buddhas of confession. Imagining all the protector deities, the protectors of the small scope, Vaishravana, the protector of the medium scope, Dharmaraja, Kalarupa, protector of the great scope, Mahakala, all the Dharmapalas, imagining Palden Lamo, who Rinpoche said was our protector deity, the wrathful emanation of Tara. We're so fortunate. Just imagine all these beings in the space in front of you. Now we recognize that we have to become a Buddha if we want to become the most reliable guides in the universe. We have to cherish others more than ourselves. And even though many of us aren't bodhisattvas yet, I'm not a bodhisattva yet, I can do something with my mind that will make me one in the future, and will plant seeds in my mind that will grow into that bodhicitta in the future. And I recognize that just like myself, all sentient beings want happiness and the causes of happiness. Just like myself, all sentient beings want to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And the only way that all sentient beings will be able to achieve that happiness, that complete bliss, and achieve freedom from suffering, that fearlessness, is to engage in the practice of the Dharma and achieve the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation. So we think about what we could do for those sentient beings right now. And as we become higher and higher on the paths, we'll have more skills as we become real bodhisattvas, and we can actually emanate bodies, and we could connect to more and more sentient beings. We could actually do what I'm talking about, imagining we're doing right now. But right now, if we imagine that we're doing it, it will plant seeds for us to be able to do it in the future. So imagine that you're bringing all sentient beings here to the teaching. Imagine that you're bringing all the hell beings, all the hungry ghost beings, all of the animal beings, all the humans, all the demigods, and all the gods. Imagine you're bringing every single sentient being, leaving out none. And we're trying to connect to every being in the universe when we're doing this, because the Buddha connects to every being in the universe in a way where he or she has complete loving concern for them, and can actually do something about their sufferings, because we know that the Buddhas can emanate in so many different forms and teach so many different things to countless sentient beings in order to help them mature on their path, because the Buddhas can't do it for anyone. The Buddhas teach the truth of suchness, and that's how beings are liberated. So we imagine that we brought all of these beings here to hear the truth of suchness so that they can be liberated. And we're starting to plant the seeds for us to be able to become a Buddha, to connect with all of them, to help them become liberated. So now imagine that everyone's here, all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas, the entire merit field is here. Now imagining all sentient beings are here, hell, hungry ghost, animal, humans, demigods, and gods. We've brought them all here. So every type of being that exists in the universe is now here, holy beings and those beings who will be holy in the future. And with that in mind, now we'll recite the beginning of the Sanchu Mulang. It's the 7-limb prayer that we find in the King of Aspiration prayers. It was one of Rinpoche's favorite prayers. So we'll just do the beginning 7-limb prayer. So now imagine that you are leading all sentient beings in this prayer, and imagine that all sentient beings are able to listen to these holy words and recite them with you. And then we're making, again, the 7-limb prayer that we went over last time in greater detail. So I won't go over it in that kind of great detail that I did last time. But again, the 7-limb prayer of offering, making prostrations, making offering, confession, rejoicing, requesting, the teachings to the teachers to teach, begging the teachers to stay in this world and not pass into nirvana, and then making a dedication. And then we will, after that, read a prayer to Tara. Let me make sure I have all of this. Anyway, I'll have it all when I need it. There we go. Okay. So the King of Aspiration prayers is called Samantabhadra's Aspiration to Good Actions, from the Ganda Vyuha chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Okay. In the language of India, Arya Bhadra Charya Pranadana Raja. in the language of Tibet. Papa Zambo Jubi Molanji Jelpo. The translator's homage. Homage to Manjushri, the youthful. To all the Buddhas, the lions of the human race, in all directions of the universe, through past, present, and future. To every single one of you, I bow in homage. Devotion fills my body, speech, and mind. Through the power of this prayer, aspiring to good action, all the virtuous ones appear vivid here before my mind, and I multiply my body as many times as atoms in the universe, each one bowing in prostration to all the Buddhas. In every atom preside as many Buddhas as there are atoms, and around them are their bodhisattva heirs, and so I imagine them filling completely the entire space of reality, saluting them with an endless ocean of praise, with the sounds of an ocean of different melodies. I sing the Buddha's noble qualities and praise all those who have gone to perfect bliss. This is actually now where the offering section starts. It's mislabeled on this text. Now this is where the offering section starts. To every Buddha, I make offerings of the loveliest flowers, of beautiful garlands, of music and perfumed ointments, the best of parasols, the brightest lamps and finest incense. To every Buddha I make offerings, exquisite garments and the most fragrant scents, powdered incense heaped as high as Mount Meru, arranged in perfect symmetry. Then the vast and unsurpassable offerings, inspired by my devotion to all the Buddhas, and moved by the power of my faith in good actions, I prostrate and offer to all you victorious ones. Whatever negative actions I have committed while driven by desire, hatred, and ignorance, with my body, my speech, and also my mind, before you I confess and purify each and every one. With a heart full of delight, I rejoice at all the merits of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, those in training, and the Arhats beyond training, and in every living being throughout the entire universe. You who are like beacons of light shining through the worlds, who pass through the stages of enlightenment to attain Buddhahood, freedom from all attachment, I exhort you, all you protectors, turn the unsurpassable wheel of Dharma. Joining my palms together, I pray, to you who intend to pass into nirvana, remain for eons as many as atoms in this world, and bring well-being and happiness to all living beings. What little virtue I have gathered through my homage, through offering confession and rejoicing, through exhortation and prayer of all of it, I dedicate to the enlightenment of all beings. Now we'll make supplications to Aryatara. Lori found this text by Pabunka Rinpoche, which is really, really beautiful. And it's written as kind of a request to Tara, just as a student connecting to Tara. It's very, very nice. So we'll read this today, and then we'll do the Heart Sutra. So we have some new info today. Okay, so this is called The Crying Child's Tormented Calling of the Perfect Destroyer, Qualified, Gone Beyond, Exalted Mother Tara. And we can always, at this point, think about beings who are sick, think about beings who are suffering. Tara is the long life deity. Tara is a healer. Tara is a wisdom deity as well. We know from taking so many Tara initiations, you can look at Tara as a wisdom deity, as a healing deity, and so forth. So long life deity, there's so many different aspects and qualities of Tara. So think about beings who are maybe sick and so forth. And also say prayers for Geshe Dorje Damdu, who's got quite a cold and canceled a couple teachings lately. So pray for his long life for sure. Because he's just such an incredible teacher, and we don't need any more obstacles to us learning the Dharma, and we need to have teachers in order to be able to progress in our spiritual transformation, and he's a very good one. So, the crying child's tormented calling of the perfect destroyer, qualified, gone beyond, exalted Mother Tara. May the Guru understand. So it's like, please pay attention to me, hear me, Arya Tara. So I don't have the Tibetan for this, but I was looking at this trying to understand. May the Guru understand Arya Tara. Doesn't make sense. So it's may the Guru understand Arya Tara, like they're inseparable. So that's my conclusion on this. If it's not the correct conclusion to Pabunka Rinpoche, I apologize. But I know how Pabunka Rinpoche writes, and the way that he saw that the Lama is inseparable from the Yidam being such an important part of the practice. So this is how I read this, but you could read it maybe a different way, but it's calling out to the Lama Aryatara. May the Guru understand Aryatara, self-appearing action of all the victorious ones, mother of the victorious ones, quick liberator, heroine, persuaded by the strong longing from our hearts, without separation, please guide us with compassion. Wherever anyone is in danger, quickly guide them with compassion. Persuaded by the strong longing from our hearts, without separation, please guide us with compassion. From all outer and inner poverty, except to quickly liberate. Persuaded by strong longing from our hearts, without separation, please guide us with compassion. All the success desired for anything, action granting the wishes, persuaded by the strong longing from our hearts, without separation, please guide us with compassion. For the duration of this life, the next life, and the intermediate state, be the guide of everyone, persuaded by strong longing from our hearts, without separation, please guide us with compassion. With compassion, please bless us to direct our mind toward holy Dharma. With compassion, please bless us to pacify outer and inner opposing conditions. With compassion, please bless us to succeed in obtaining the necessary conditions as wished. With compassion, please bless us to establish the banner of attainment. With compassion, please bless us to train in renunciation and bodhicitta, to realize, with compassion, please bless us to realize ultimate nature without hallucination. With compassion, please bless us to actually meet your pleased face. With compassion, please bless us to be nurtured by the melodious nectar of your holy speech. With compassion, please bless us to increase experience of the two stages. In short, other than you, there is no object of reliance for anything. Like a mother who loves her only son without separation, please guide us with compassion. May the Guru understand, may the Guru understand, may the Guru understand. So very lovely poem written by Pabonka Rinpoche, who was such an incredible teacher and such an important commentator in the Lam Rim tradition that we know about. And I know that the text Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand is a text that absolutely changed my life when I read it. And really, I don't know, 96 or so, I read this text, and it really convinced me. It's maybe 97, really convinced me of the need to, have a good teacher and study really well and understand renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. So I encourage all of you, if you haven't read Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, it's not a quick read. It's like this big in English. And there's a lot of fire and brimstone in it. But at the time of my life that I was at, the fire and brimstone didn't seem as fire and brimstoney to me. It seemed like, I had suffered quite a bit. So it seemed like, all that kind of suffering Pabunka's mentioning, I believe it, because I just had a lot of it. So it was really helpful in my journey of whatever you want to call whatever this thing I've been doing for almost 30 years now. I can't believe it. It doesn't seem like it. And it seems, when I think about it, like, wow, I would think I would be much further along. Decades of being immersed in some way in this, but our mind has so many defilements. And, since beginningless time, as I've said in the past many times, we've been looking at things incorrectly. And we've had these afflictions that seem like they're just who we are every time in every life that we have. They seem like this attachment and this anger is just kind of part of me. I'm really an angry person. That's just how I am. And sometimes we become very just satisfied with, oh, that's just who I am, and then don't apply an antidote to try to become better. And the Buddha taught us that we can all become perfect. So attachment and hatred and ignorance, none of these things that are part of me right now have to be. I can separate from them because my mind's in the nature of clear light. My mind's not in the nature of attachment, hatred, or ignorance. And the way that we do that, separating, the thing that the Buddha discovered that, at that time, 2,600 years ago, in that particular world system, people hadn't discovered, was that it was the self-grasping ignorance that causes all of this negativity to emerge, that causes our attachment, hatred, and ignorance of the various other forms other than the ignorance, which is the self-grasping ignorance, to form and to be part of who we are at that time. But it isn't who we really are. It isn't who we have to be. And the Buddha said that by applying wisdom, by starting to understand the true nature of reality, your whole reaction to everything would change. And that reaction and that experience of everything changing would allow for you to no longer have to experience the unchanged state. The unchanged state that we're always in, where we're just dealing with our attachment, hatred, and ignorance. And that state can change and transform into perfection, where there is an absence of attachment, an absence of hatred, an absence of ignorance, because an antidote has been applied to that which gives rise to attachment, anger, and ignorance. So therefore, when the antidote's applied to that which gives rise to all those negative things, then there's no longer a chance for those negative things to occur, because of the dependent origination that was making them occur is no longer there. The causes and conditions that gave rise to that collection of suffering is no longer there. If we can apply the wisdom that's mentioned in the Heart Sutra. So we're not going to get into too many of the details of the Heart Sutra, but we know the Heart Sutra explicitly is talking about the middle way consequence view, the view that nothing is inherently existent. Things exist. Things that exist, exist. Things that you and I agree exist, but they don't inherently exist. The way that they exist is different than the way that we think they exist. And the way that we think they exist causes us all of our problems. And if we can make our minds understand the way that they really exist, then we'll be wiser about our actions and our reactions. So explicitly, the Heart Sutra is talking about the nature of reality, the unfindability of inherent existence, intrinsic existence, objective existence of the self of person and self of phenomena. The unfindability of that inherent existence. That inherent existence that we believe is true doesn't exist. So we believe in things that don't exist all of the time. So this is when it talks about hallucination in the text. We're basically hallucinating. It's just in a subtle way all of the time. We aren't saying, oh, there's that thing over there that inherently exists. We just believe it does. It's not like we've even thought about it ever. And that's why it's so easy to just keep things going, keep it rolling the way that it is, with attachment, hatred, and ignorance, because we've never really questioned any of this before, and maybe not really questioned it enough. The Buddha said, if there's any kind of grasping left, you haven't questioned it enough. But if you get to the point where you establish that nothing exists and nothing matters, then you've taken away too much. But if you leave too much, then you haven't taken away enough. You haven't found the view either. So it's this middle way you have to find that all of the different tenet systems of Buddhism assert they've found. The Vibhashika school, Sautrantika school, Chittamantran school, the Madhyamika school, all of these systems within the tenets that Buddha himself taught, it claim to have the middle way view because of this reason or that reason. But as you get through the higher schools and you get to the more subtle things that Buddha taught, at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, Buddha did not present the final view of emptiness. Buddha actually presented an incomplete view of emptiness that will not get you to even the state of arhatship of the solitary liberation vehicle. It's so very interesting. A lot of people only rely on the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And if you rely on only the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and you believe that the second turning of the wheel and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma are fabrications, then you haven't done what the Buddha said, and that's cut and rub the teachings. Because if you keep an open mind and say, oh, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma may be something the Buddha said, even though I really rely on the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, when you look at the view that was expressed at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and you look at what the Buddha stated philosophically about the Four Noble Truths having some true existence, and showing really just explaining the emptiness of the self of person, the emptiness of a permanent, unitary, independent self of person, the emptiness of a autonomous, substantially existent self of person only. That isn't enough. And then you try and compare it to what the Buddha taught at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma philosophically, you'll find out that logically, that second turning of the wheel of Dharma negates the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And actually, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, which is very interesting, negates the view that was presented at the third turning of the wheel of Dharma in terms of the mind-only school. But all three turnings of the wheel of Dharma are necessary to have the complete package of understanding. So it's very interesting when you start to look at how to interpret the teachings of Lord Buddha, you see that the first turning of the wheel of Dharma and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma are the interpretable teachings, and that the second turning of the wheel of Dharma is the definitive teaching because it's teaching the final ultimate truth. And unless you start to navigate the different schools and understandings and theories, you could just land on a closed-minded view, say, oh, well, this is my tradition. This is the oldest tradition. You know, these other things, some guy in history said isn't, you know, like we're relying on, well, this was 300 years after the Buddha and not 600 years after the Buddha. Like, really, let's do what the Buddha said and cut and rub. And let's use logic and reasoning. The Buddha said so many times, my advices and opinions were given for ordinary people. My tenets were taught to yogis. And it's the yogis that get rid of the grasping at self, the self-grasping ignorance. And the Buddha started with the slow steps, baby steps, when he first turned the wheel of Dharma. And he said, let's start with the self of person. And then he got to the second turning of the wheel of Dharma and he gave the whole show. He even taught Kala Chakra somewhere else at the same time as the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. So there was a lot going on at that Vulture Peak Mountain time at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then the Buddha realized that there was going to be another interpretation needed for some sentient beings that wasn't quite as radical as the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And the Buddha taught the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which becomes such an important point in order to practice Tantrayana, even though it isn't the final view in terms of tenet. Very strange. And that becomes the interpretable Dharma that we have to come to understand. And if you look at the third turning of the wheel of Dharma and you're teaching on Buddha nature, very, very easy to misinterpret it. Because the Buddha talks about this Buddha that has all the major and minor marks inside of us already. So we have to learn to interpret that this is a matcher, we can mature into that because we possess this mind that's empty of inherent existence. Our mind isn't static and stationary, and this mind can transform because of that. And we can go from this state where we certainly do not have 32 marks and 80 minor marks, and certainly are not omniscient, and certainly are not the most loving, caring beings in the universe. But because these defilements that are part of kind of the mind right now, it's kind of a bad way to put it, but are part of who we are right now, they're adventitious. They aren't part of the nature of that final nature of our mind. So we can remove all of them and we can then only have the good stuff in the mind. And then because the mind doesn't have the nature of this or that, it can be just good stuff. If that makes sense. So the mind can be just good stuff because it's not in the nature of not just good stuff and it's not in the nature of only good stuff. So the mind can be in the nature of bad stuff or in the nature of good stuff because of dependent origination. So if the mind isn't naturally sullied, then if it's not naturally sullied, it can be not naturally unsullied too. So therefore, it's our choice. It's this mind is just like a mirror and a reflection and an illumination going on. And it dependently originates into experience that it contains, that its imprints refer to, if you will. So it's pretty neat when we look at how we start to interpret Lord Buddha's teachings and how we have to do it with a fine-tooth comb, because Buddha, you know, when he first realized enlightenment, sat for 49 days and didn't go teach, and then was requested to teach. And he said, you know, I found this Dharma that's so hard to understand. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to do that. And because there's so many varieties of mental continuums and everybody's in a different place and has different aptitudes, there isn't one religion that can just be taught here. There isn't one philosophy that can just be taught that's going to just help everyone. I can't paint broad brush a view because what you need to know for your stepping stone and what they need to know for their stepping stone may not be exactly the same thing. And we see the first turning of the wheel of Dharma breaks into 18 sub-schools of Vaibhashikas, 2 sub-schools of Sautrantika, and it just breaks into all these different schools. And then the sects within these different kind of offshoots just decide that that's the only thing that was right. And that's, if you look at the history, this is what basically happened. And then this group that decided this was the only thing that was right formed a group and then made a bigger group and then spread it to other countries. And you see, this is how a lot of the dharmas didn't really get analyzed in a complete way in a broader picture. But we have access to all of them. So we shouldn't say, oh, well, this is because of history. Well, who cares about history? We look for truth. That's the most important thing. And the Buddha said we have to cut and rub all of the teachings. So it's important to look at all of the teachings Buddha gave and say, does that logically make sense? Does that logically make sense? And you're going to find concordance, and you're going to find how none of it's contradictory, because it does make sense depending on who it's being presented to. So let's do the Heart Sutra, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way, he saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kala jube ne jo damba ne nguje du chu ngai du do jen ru ba lama yi bu jenzi ne zung gandro zo la ja ze lo aga samara de jana ra samara be aga samara de jana ra samara Aga samara jashana razamara be deyata on gate gate paragate parasangate buddhizo baba gonjo zonji gae de medoji lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji dragi baji medo beja danje den goriezo geren donja je jewada medon be janda andrawada domba donji bonzon zonjoji daji de janden da de lejo. Now I'll make a mandala offering, request for teaching, and going, from the teacher all the way back, the entire lineage, all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas have influenced this teaching so much. So we're really requesting this teaching, but thinking about the lineage all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. And this is an unbroken lineage we're so fortunate to be part of. We know that Kensar Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all of our teachers, their lineage is traced right back to Buddha Shakyamuni, from teacher to student to teacher to student. And that is something that's so rare and just incredible when I think about it. Then I think about the fact that, like if from a family perspective, if you think about my great uncle, my great grandfather or something, and I look at, Khensa Rinpoche had such a huge influence, obviously, in half of my life. We knew each other 25 years. I'm 50. So for half of my life, I was with Khensa Geshe Wandak. So I think of him like as the strongest type of family. And then I think of like, well, who was his teacher? And then I think it's amazing that we land on Arya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and beings like that. I mean, really think about that. We land on a Sangha. Like my great grand teacher was a Sangha. And Arya Nagarjuna and Manjushri and just all of these incredible beings that we read about like it's a fairy tale or something. But these were actual living philosophers that wrote and had students, and those students were just like us. Then they became teachers, and then they had students, and then eventually we're sitting here because of the kindness of Khensa Geshe Wandak and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and beings like Geshe Dorje Damdu, who you can still sign up in the Nalanda diploma course until the end of the month. And there haven't been too many classes yet, so you won't be lost at all. They've been doing some technical difficulties, and Geshe-la has been a little bit sick. So the Nalanda diploma course, it's like so cheap to sign up for, and it's a year and a half long, 2 classes a week when everything's in line. And you can take the class anytime you want. You can take it live. It's going to be at like 9 in the morning usually, or 6 in the morning on Sundays, I think. But you can also look at the recordings later, and it's like not like a diploma. It's not scary, but you'll get the best Buddhist education you've ever had in your entire life if you take this course. You will not be disappointed. If you want to know about Buddhism, Nalanda diploma course through Tibet House in New Delhi, I think it's 60 or 70 bucks for a year and a half, American dollars, something like that. So yeah, I'm just doing one more pitch, one more plea to folks, and anybody can just get in touch with me if you can't find the right link for it, because sometimes their website acts funny. But if you go to Tibet House, New Delhi, Nalanda diploma course, you have till the end of March to sign up for it. Yeah, really good. So let's do mandala offering. I forgot where we were for a second. I was handing out brochures. All right, let's do this. Okay, the fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Okay, so we're going to do the prayer of refuge and bodhicitta in English. Again, anyone who's new, when I say through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, I'm saying that because I'm talking. I'm the guy talking, teaching the Dharma right now. But what you're going to say is through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma. So I don't want to confuse anyone. So we'll do this in English as well as Tibetan 3 times. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. It's funny how our eyes and our minds don't always do the same thing. I was reading the prayer and it says listening. So it's just funny how our minds, play tricks. We were watching this thing on neuroscience yesterday, and it was showing how all it takes is someone to, if you're supposed to say what color is the writing on the paper, so it'll be, red, and then, but if someone writes green and red, it plays a trick on our mind where like almost half the time the people say it's the color that's written, not the color it is. So it's funny just to show how our minds can play tricks on us. And it went into all of these different details about, it was very, very interesting how the neuroscience view, this particular documentary, was exactly what we find in Lorig. Buddha Shakyamuni taught 2,600 years. I mean, exactly, right down to like meaning generalities and how we're really just going through files in our mind. When we see a car, we're just thinking we have a file about like the first cars that's a frame of reference that we're using in order for labeling. It was just incredible to see how Lorig, mind and awareness in Tibetan Buddhism, the study of mind, Buddhist psychology, aligns exactly with what neuroscience is saying. And, neuroscience lands at, we just don't know why we have this sense of I. We can say how it all comes together and how all of these, everyone has their own unique experience, and we can figure out how the brains and, and how all of these kind of channels and so forth are causing experience to happen. But this sense of I, this sense of this is me that's having all of this experience happening, it hits a wall to a certain degree. And Buddhism doesn't hit a wall. Buddhism explains that whole process of direct perception and inferential cognition and subsequent cognition, and correctly assuming consciousness and non-discerning direct perceivers and doubts and wrong consciousness. Buddhism explains how all of that happens, maybe not as fancy, and doesn't explain it, in the fanciest way, but it's exact same kind of explanation that I heard yesterday on this documentary on neuroscience. And then it explains how this continuum of consciousness doesn't end and doesn't have a beginning, and how this isn't the only kind of experience that all of these firings in this particular body has had, because the subtle consciousness moves forward and the subtle consciousness moved into this particular set of aggregates that is having this experience. But when this set of aggregates loses its potential karmically, we would say, to keep creating this experience, whether we die prematurely or die of old age, or karmically, this particular experience is no longer a viable option. Our subtle consciousness moves forward into whatever the next karmic experience is, the next viable option. This energy moves forward. Our consciousness moves forward with the energy, with the wind, to our next life. And we say that, this suffering state has had no beginning, but can have an end, because all results are dependent upon causes, and suffering is a result. So if you remove all the causes for suffering state, then it has an end. And if there are no more causes for suffering state, then non-suffering state has no end. And that's how Buddhism presents samsara, cyclic existence, suffering of cyclic existence, and nirvana, which is complete liberation. And there's two kinds of nirvana: the abiding nirvana of the hearers and solitary realizer, lesser vehicle, hinayana vehicle, whatever you want to call it, and then the non-abiding nirvana of the Buddha, which is the highest state that all sentient beings will achieve. And in the highest view of Buddhism, we say there's really one vehicle. It's the Mahayana vehicle. Yes, and ultimately there's one vehicle. There are these other vehicles, the hearer, solitary realizer. Then in the Mahayana, we have the perfection vehicle and the tantric vehicle. But really it all is the Mahayana vehicle, which is perfection and tantric vehicle, because all sentient beings will become a Buddha, and all sentient beings require the Mahayana vehicle, require bodhicitta, require putting others' needs before their own, require having immeasurable great love, immeasurable great compassion for all sentient beings. So because all sentient beings innately want to have 100% happiness, we have this kind of nature where we want happiness, we want to be free from suffering. The Buddha decided to go for the gusto and achieve complete perfection and achieve the complete cessation of suffering and achieve the complete amount of happiness that could be achieved. And now the Buddha has that state. Buddhas have that state. The male and female Buddhas are in that state. And because of the Bodhisattva path that they've gone on, that state comes back to help us because they've made vows when they were bodhisattvas to become Buddhas for the sake of everyone. So they would be the most reliable guides in the universe, and we will become the most reliable guides in the universe. We all want happiness and want to be free from suffering. We all want 100% happiness, and we all want 100% freedom from suffering. And the only way to achieve that is to start to care for others and start to see things more correctly. Sanje chodan soji chonan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi chuji jibe zonanje trola benje zanje rubarjo sanje chodan soji chonan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi chuji jibe zonanje trola benje zanje rubarjo sanje chodan soji chonan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi chuji jibe zonanje trola benje zanje rubarjo. Just recite a couple prayers. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector, to you, I make prostrations. This is from Dignaga's Pramana Samujaya. And from Dharmakirti's commentary, the Pramana Vartika Karika, the commentary on this text, the one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth forever, the noble light rays, to you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are the nature of emptiness and selflessness. Transcending sorrow is peace. The Guru is the Buddha, the Guru is the Dharma, likewise the Guru is the Sangha, the Guru is the source of everything wholesome. I go for refuge to the Guru. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings, as it says in the Sanchim Mulang, the King of Aspiration prayers. All right. So good to see all of you on all the different applications. Happy Sunday morning. It's such a happy day. Any day that we can practice the Dharma and think about the Dharma, and we have this human basis with the 8 leisures, we have an opportunity to transform this mind from the sullied state into an absolute state of purity. It's incredible. I mean, we will be able to eventually have these different bodies of the Buddha. We'll have the exalted wisdom body and the nature body and the enjoyment body and the emanation body. It's just incredible to think that we could go from the place that we're sitting right now as human beings with aches and pains and problems and not so, great emotional states to a place of complete perfection, a complete state of ease, a complete state of peace, a complete state of just fearlessness and bliss. And that's something that I'm really interested in, and something I've seen in the eyes of many great beings. I've seen such incredible beings throughout the short time that I've been involved with Buddhism. When you look at it in terms of a lifetime, if you could live over 100 years, such a short time that I've been involved with Buddhism, but I've had the fortune of meeting with these beings that clearly possess this answer, and that clearly are just not affected in the same way by reality as me. So I truly aspire to have these realizations, if I can, in this lifetime. I'm really shooting for that. And the only way that these kind of realizations can occur is if we, every single day get up and try to transform our minds. We have to take this Dharma into our daily life, into our hour by hour life, minute by minute life. This can't be just some words on the paper or some ideals or some kind of neat concepts or something that we kind of like just decide we're part of this club. So we're just in a new club in our minds. It has to be something that truly transforms our state of being. And if we've been involved with the Dharma for years, and we don't feel like there's a transformation taking place, if we don't, when we read these prayers, have something internally like happen where we really feel them, it just seems like we're merely reciting words, then we need to take a look at what our daily practice looks like and what we're doing in terms of the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teachings for shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity, because these stages of the path were put in order for a reason. And in order for us to have realizations, we have to follow it in that order and try to achieve the foundations of the latter realizations. And I think a lot of folks find parts of the Dharma that they are really satisfied with and find interesting, and other parts of the Dharma that are maybe boring or maybe are uncomfortable to practice. And if those uncomfortable, boring parts are parts that are in the earlier stages of the Lam Rim, and you haven't realized them so much that you can taste it, that when you read it, your heart just, flutters. Like when you read about, the human life of leisure and opportunity, if you don't have a sense of just amazement that takes place, if it just is like boring, or if you hear the three pots. I remember Rinpoche used to teach the three pots a lot and talked about how you should listen to the teachings, and you shouldn't listen to it with the pot that's turned upside down where you're not listening, and you shouldn't listen to it with a pot with a hole in it that's forgetting what you're listening to because you're not paying attention enough, and you shouldn't be listening like a pot that's dirty, that's contaminated and coming in with all these preconceived notions. You should really be listening purely. And I remember thinking, when is he going to stop talking about this, when I was younger? And now when I read about it, and I heard Depeche the other day on a group discussion talking about it a little bit, it almost brought tears to my eyes. And now it is. It's because it's so profound. And when you learn that you have to have the wisdom arisen from hearing in order to get the wisdom arisen from analysis, in order to get the wisdom arisen from meditation, in order for me to see emptiness, I have to hear things correctly. In order for me to help others, I have to listen to them correctly. I have to be able to hear what they're saying. As a bodhisattva, if I can't be fully invested in each and every experience I have with an individual, how could I even know what they need or want? And the Buddha is the best listener because the Buddha is omniscient. So the Buddha hears it all. The Buddha is the ultimate, not overturned, not leaky, not contaminated pot, because the Buddha just purely perceives. But right now, I have ways that aren't like that. I see my whole world through these pots. Everything that I do is this way. When I'm studying a book, even, it's a state of mind. What's the state of mind? Am I paying attention to what I'm reading? Am I just kind of paying attention to what I'm reading? Am I reading it like, well, this is the mind-only view, and I'm into the Madhyamika Prasangika, and then just reading it and missing all the gold, missing the fact that the Dalai Lama said the mind-only school is going to be really necessary to get you into Tantra. Missing that whole part, just judging it and not understanding that these are things that, if I let them saturate my mind, will be the foundations of all my practice. So we should really keep an open mind, but also a critical mind. Now, I know that's a strange concept, how you can remain an open mind, but critical. But if you don't do that, you're going to miss gold, even if it's mixed in with things that aren't the gold. And we're going to need to extract all the gold in order to get to the point where we have gold to offer others. So it's very important to take these beginning teachings so seriously. And we just finished the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. It was really emotional for me. It was the first time that we had gone through the Lam Rim Chemo in a section without Rinpoche. And I feel like a year later, we didn't go through it without Rinpoche. Because I look at all of the teachings that we gave, and I gave, or whoever I was giving it, I was the one talking. But I think about when I feel most connected to Rinpoche. I feel connected to Rinpoche all day, really. But when I feel most connected to Rinpoche, it's when I'm talking about the Dharma. And I really came to this conclusion, and I think I've shared it with you. It's because all of the stuff that I'm saying, I was normally just hearing him say and then saying it. So I feel so close and connected to him when I'm talking the Dharma, and I don't have to think about the Tibetan or anything. It's just like a purely being able to express in our way of expressing things, everything Rinpoche ever said to me. And I was really fortunate when Rinpoche taught to be able to understand how these teachings were instructions for meditation practice. I really got that early on. I wasn't great at doing it, but I really got, I think because of Pabunka Rinpoche's liberation in the palm of your hand, I have to say, and because of imprints from previous lives that we all have because we're all sitting here, you know, I, for whatever reason, really got the Lam Rim was just an instruction to practice. These were all meditation topics. And as decades went on, it started to sink in more and more and more to the point where I don't know how long ago, many years ago, it just clicked where I started to see each and every one of these things as something to put into my daily life. And when I, had afflictions arise, and then I firmly faced and averted them, sometimes a week later, immediately firmly faced and averted. Maybe that was a week later, and I dwelled in my yuckiness for a week. I knew how to apply these antidotes. I knew what the practices were to apply, how to firmly face and avert my destructive emotions. And luckily these days, the gap, we talked about the gap at the beginning of the teaching between where I'm at now and Buddhahood, the gap between my firmly facing and averting my yuckiness is smaller. I really, because of these teachings and because of the saturation of my mind, because of Khenser Geshe Wandak, I'm clued in quicker, not quick enough, not quick enough to not act out in ways that I don't want to, but I'm clued in quicker than I was 25 or whatever years ago when I met Khenser Geshe Wandak, oh boy, this is going to be something that's going to cause you suffering. Non-virtue causes suffering. Virtue causes happiness. You're creating your future reality, Jeff. What kind of future reality do you want? And all of these seeds of negativity that you're planting, that you planted, whether it was for a day or 2 days or for a week or for 2 minutes, all these negative seeds will give rise to a negative result. But the Buddha taught us the 4 opponent powers. The Buddha was so kind, as we talked about a few classes ago, to show us how to purify these negativities, and said even the 5 heinous crimes of killing your mother, killing your father, drawing blood from a Buddha, killing an Arhat, and dividing the Sangha, all of these things could be purified with the 4 opponent powers. So we know that this is such a powerful antidote that we can apply. And the gap between when we act out and apply that antidote really matters because of the power of magnification of karma. We know that it just gets worse and worse in terms of in our mind. And when we have inappropriate mental conduct around, when we're angry at someone and we let it fester and we think of all the reason that it's right, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if we can view the person that we're angry at as a spiritual guide, as the Dalai Lama says, then that kind of puts a stop. We say, oh, this person's the only person who could teach me patience. Then it kind of stops this way of thinking that's so incorrect. The Dalai Lama said that he would say that verse of the 8 verses for training the mind by Geshe Langri Tamba. He would say that, may I view this person as an excellent spiritual guide, when he would, encounter someone who made him upset. And then he would literally in his mind make a prostration to them. Wow, such incredible advice that we have. So incredible. So anyway, I'd like to read something from the Lam Rim. We're about to start the medium scope section. So I want to read the Lam Rim Dudun today, the song of the stages of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. It contains the whole Great Treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment in it. Rinpoche taught it many times. I won't give any commentary. I mean it this time. I won't comment on any of the stanzas. And then we're going to get right into the medium scope in the Lam Rim Chemo. And the very, very first pages of it are incredible. So we're going to look at those first pages in the Lam Rim Chemo. Hopefully now we've meditated enough that our attachment for this life is no longer. So now we're going to get working on getting rid of attachment to future lives in the medium scope. So in that the prayer by the great Sakya master, Satya Kunga Nimpo, that says, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. That's referring to what you learn about in the small scope, how to, get rid of attachment for this life. And then if you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. So the section we're getting into now is going to deal with that. What's renunciation? What are we renouncing? What is samsara? We learned what samsara is already previously, and learned about the different realms of samsara, but we'll wait till we get there. And let's just first read the Song of the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. Namo Guru Manju Gosha. Homage to the Buddha, a supreme of the Shakya clan, whose body is born from a million virtues and excellences, whose speech satisfies the hopes of infinite beings, whose mind sees all things as they are. Homage to Maitreya and Manjushri, supreme disciples of the peerless master, bodhisattvas assuming the responsibilities of the Buddha's deeds by magically sending forth emanations to countless realms. Homage to Nagarjuna and Asanga, who are widely famed throughout the three worlds, ornaments among the commentators who precisely elucidate the mother of the Buddhas, the depth of which is so difficult to fathom. Homage to Dipankara, the holder of the quintessential treasure of instructions, consisting of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, the sublime lineages of the two great trailblazers. You are the eyes to see all the teachings, the supreme gate to liberation for the fortunate ones. Moved by compassion, you elucidate the Dharma with skillful means. To you, the spiritual masters, I pay homage. Through Nagarjuna and Asanga, banners unto all humankind, ornament amongst the wise of the world, was transmitted the sublime Lamrim teaching. Fulfilling all aspirations of sentient beings, it is the wish-fulfilling gem. Being the confluence of 1,000 streams of teachings, it is also an ocean of eloquent speech. Through it, all doctrines are perceived as non-contradictory. All teachings arise as personal advice. The intent of the Buddha is swiftly realized. One is protected from the precipice of great negativity. Therefore, the wise and fortunate ones of India and Tibet have relied upon this supreme instruction, known as the stages of the path of three beings. Which wise person would not be greatly drawn to it? Even hearing or teaching this tradition just once, that embodies the essence of all the Buddha's words, gathers waves of merit equal to hearing or teaching all the doctrines of the Buddha. The root of all causes, giving rise to happiness now and in the future, is the practice of relying in thought and action upon a supreme, genuine spiritual guide who reveals the path. Seeing this, follow them even at the cost of your life, and please them with the offering of practice of the teachings. I, the yogi, have done this myself. You, O seeker of liberation, should do likewise. This birth of leisure is more precious than a wish-fulfilling gem. Found but once, it is as brief as a flash of lightning. Hard to obtain, it is easily lost. Reflecting thus, realize that worldly activities are merely like the grain of a husk of a grain, and strive day and night to take its essence. The venerable I, the yogi, practiced in this way. You, seeker of liberation, should do likewise. There is no certainty that after death, lower rebirth does not await, but it is certain that the three jewels have the power to protect you from these fears. Therefore, taking refuge resolutely, do not let the refuge instructions degenerate. By reflecting well on positive and negative karmas and their results, rely on properly engaging and abandoning negativities and practicing virtues. The venerable I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Should you not find a suitable rebirth, swift progress along the supreme path will not occur. Cultivate its causes in their entirety. Of vital importance is purification, particularly of karmic defilements of the three doors, tainted by stains of negativities and infractions. Relying on the four opponent powers regularly is thus essential. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. If you do not strive to contemplate the demerits of the truth of suffering, a genuine wish for liberation will not arise. If you do not contemplate the cause of suffering, the door to samsara, knowledge of cutting the root of samsara will not arise. Generating renunciation characterized by a feeling of despondency towards samsara, as well as having knowledge of what binds you to samsara, is imperative. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Bodhicitta is the central pillar of the path of the supreme vehicle, is the foundation of all great deeds of Bodhisattva, is a gold-making elixir of the two collections. It is a treasure trove of merit for collecting the vast accumulations of virtues. Knowing this, heroic bodhisattvas cherish this precious mind as their supreme practice. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Generosity, the wish-fulfilling gem which satisfies the hope of beings, is the best weapon to cut the knot of miserliness, and is the bodhisattva deed that gives rise to unfailing determination. It is the basis of the spread of fame throughout the 10 directions. Realizing this, the wise ones practice the noble path of giving everything, their body, possessions, and virtue. I, the yogis, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Ethical discipline, the water that washes away the stains of negativity, moonlight that cools the scorching heat of afflictions. Elegant like Mount Meru amongst beings, it is the power before which all beings bow, minds free from fear. Realizing this, noble ones protect the vows they have received as they would their very eyes. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Patience, the supreme ornament for the powerful, is an exemplary fortitude against the torment of afflictions. A Garuda to destroy the enemy of the snake of hatred. It is an impenetrable shield against the weapon of harsh words. Realizing this, familiarize yourself in every way with the armor of supreme patience. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. By donning the armor of unrelenting, stable perseverance, qualities of learning and realization increase like the waxing moon. All actions become meaningful. All work embarked upon reaches fruition as intended. Realizing this, the bodhisattvas dispel indolence and engage with intense perseverance. I, the yogi, practice in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Meditative concentration is the sovereign that rules the mind. When stabilized, it stands unwavering like the king of mountains. When directed, it engages all virtuous objects, giving rise to the great bliss that makes the body and mind pliant. Realizing this and always resorting to meditative concentration, great yogis dispel the enemy of mental wandering. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Wisdom is the eye to see the profound reality, the means to pull out samsara's root. The treasure of excellence is praised in all scriptures, the supreme lamp that dispels the darkness of ignorance. Realizing this, the wise, seeking freedom, strive to generate it. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. The power to cut samsara's root lies not in single-pointed concentration alone. However deeply analyzed, wisdom devoid of the path of calm abiding reverses not the delusions. Wisdom that precisely discerns reality should ride the horse of unwavering calm abiding and use the sharp weapon of madhyamika reasoning devoid of extremes to completely destroy all references of grasping at extremes. With this expansive insight that unerringly analyzes the wisdom, realizing reality will flourish. The venerable I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. What need is there to mention that single-pointed meditation accomplishes samadhi? Seeing that proper analysis grounded on discretion also gives rise to very stable samadhi, but that without unwavering focus on reality, that which unwaveringly focuses on reality. Amazing are those who strive to achieve this union of calm abiding and special insight. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Praise be to you who meditate on space-like emptiness during meditative equipoise, and illusion-like emptiness during post-meditation. Through this union of method and wisdom, you reach the culmination of the bodhisattva deeds. Realizing this, not remaining complacent over incomplete paths, is the tradition of the fortunate ones. I, the yogi, practiced in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. Having properly generated the path required by both the excellent causal and resultant Mahayana vehicles, rely upon the guidance of a wise adept and enter the great ocean of Mantrayana. Embracing the pith instructions in their entirety, giving meaning to this birth of leisure that you have obtained. I, the yogi, practice in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. In order to acquaint my mind with the path and also to benefit other fortunate beings, I have herein explained in simple terms the complete path that pleases the Buddhas. I pray that by the power of this virtue, all sentient beings are never separated from the sublime and noble path. I, the yogi, prayed in this manner. You, the seeker of liberation, should do likewise. And here's additional prayers by some of Lama Tsongkhapa's disciples. just out of auspiciousness. It's in the book here. Through the kindness of my guru, I met with the teachings of the unexcelled guide. By this virtue, may this virtue be dedicated towards all beings be guided by noble gurus. Whichever pure land it may be, such as Tashita or Sugavati, where Venerable Lozandrapa, my teacher, resides, may that be the place where others and I are born as his very first disciples. Initially strive to gain vast learning. In the middle, all teachings are reflected as pith instructions. In the end, practice diligently day and night. Dedicate all virtues to the proliferation of the Dharma. That's actually by Tsongkhapa, that last one. Maybe the others are, but the last one's definitely by Tsongkhapa. It says additional prayers by disciples of Tsongkhapa, but it feels like that's in his autobiography. But okay. So what a wonderful summary of the stages of the path to enlightenment. It was so cool that we received that teaching so many times from Rinpoche, even before he taught the Great Treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And after going through the Great Treatise now a few times, once with Rinpoche, a couple on my own, now we've gone through some of it as a group. It's incredible how you see that little short poem covers everything. And you could, write 800 pages about it, like Tsongkhapa did. So let's get into the medium scope. Let's see. We'll go for another 10 minutes or so. We're going to end a little early today. I'm going to try really hard because we have to go somewhere and be somewhere. But it's wonderful. Okay, so the medium scope. So first we learned how to get rid of this attachment for this life. We learned about the teacher. Getting a good teacher is important. We learned that this human life of leisure we have is awesome, that we've met with the Dharma, we have all the causes and conditions for the Dharma, and that we should take the essence of this life. Now we learned that the way that we take the essence of this life is by practicing the teachings for beings of three capacities. So the teachings for beings of three capacities, the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity that we just learned all about how to, get rid of grasping for this life, and we learned all about the teachings for beings of medium capacity that we get rid of grasping at samsara and learn how to achieve an abiding nirvana, and the teachings for beings of great capacity where we learn how to become Buddhas. And we know in the small scope, then it goes in that section in the Lamrim Chenmo, then it goes right back to the small scope. Lama Tsongkhapa teases us with our potential because he wants us to know how important this human life we have is, how incredible this life of leisure we have is. Not only can we do what I'm about to tell you about, but keep going. Don't just read this section. Keep going, because there's going to be more. Don't think that all I'm telling you about is how to just get out of lower realms of suffering and how to have high status. It's going to get better, but this how you get high status is going to be a necessary foundation for you to achieve the final goals, and that these teachings of small and medium capacity are called in common with the teachings for beings of great capacity, the Mahayana teachings, because all of them are necessary for you to practice the Mahayana teachings. You see in Lama Tsongkhapa's, the prayer for the flourishing of the Dharma, it says, he was perfectly subdued by the hearer's conduct. We see this about Tsongkhapa, and you see how the compatibility of all the teachings, that these teachings on ethics, the teachings on karma, all these teachings that we find in the small and medium scope are quintessential and must be ethical practices that we engage in the great vehicle. And they're the foundation for the great vehicle. So now we're in the section that's going to tell us about how we would get to an abiding nirvana, how we could get rid of suffering altogether. We're going to find out that, I didn't realize that not only are the lower realms, the hell, hungry ghosts, and animals, the animals we can see, clearly don't have great lives, and clearly, are constantly in fear, constantly looking for food, constantly struggling, constantly having to be servants of smarter beings. We see that, and we see animals being used, and we see what a hard time animals have in their realms. Well, not only is that a hard time, but you have a hard time too. And you're in an upper realm. So this section says, okay, don't be satisfied with suffering that you have now. Don't be satisfied with that. And then you say, well, I have forms of happiness now too. And then Lama Tsongkhapa and all the great pandits and masters will say, well, look a little closer at what you call happiness. So the medium scope gets us to put our glasses on. Like, I see everything pretty blurry. Now it seems clearer. So it allows us to see clearer, to know more thoroughly what suffering is and what suffering isn't. So this section starts with, the various types of suffering, but I think there's a great lead in. And I would just like to read Tsongkhapa's words, really. And then we can talk about it, but I think Tsongkhapa's words are so clear. So it's chapter 17 in the English, and it's called The 8 Types of Suffering. And it says, training the mind in the stages of the path, when we look at the outline, training the mind in the stages of the path shared with persons of medium capacity. So shared in common with beings of medium capacity. That's the major heading of where we're starting. So we finished the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. And now we're getting into the teachings for beings of medium capacity. So we already are acquainted with refuge and karma, those things I was just talking about. I just mentioned leisure and opportunity, but death and impermanence and karma and lives and refuge, et cetera, et cetera. So we're acquainted with that. So now let's become more acquainted with reality, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. I bow with respect to the revered teachers who have great compassion. Be mindful of death and reflect on how you will fall into miserable realms after you die. So Lama Tsongkhapa is reminding us. So mindfulness of death isn't the medium scope. This section was headed teachings for beings of medium capacity, shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And the first thing that's mentioned is a teaching in the small scope. So we see this compatibility and necessity for all of them. And it gets mentioned in the 6 perfections section. Refer back to the mindfulness of death and the small scope. So all of these teachings, it's an integrated path, and all of these teachings are important as supports. So be mindful of death and reflect how you'll fall into miserable realms after you die. And so it says, start there. Start with this disgust with the lower realms, and you start there. And then now you're going to expand upon that kind of view. So the Lam Rim is just making our view bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The small scope view is bigger than most people's view. The medium scope view is much bigger than the small scope view. But the great scope view is so much bigger than the medium scope view. So we see how our view, our kind of way of looking, our reality, our open-mindedness, our openness of mind becomes bigger and bigger until we have the ultimate open mind, the J of the Sanjay, the omniscience. Once we wake up open, we have the ultimate open mind, the omniscient mind. So here we're just making it more and more open. We're loosening up all of the things that aren't allowing it to flow freely to every sentient being. We're loosening that up through this process. So diligently seek happy future rebirth. So it says start there. So we're in the medium scope, and it's telling us to do the small scope. Interesting. Lama Tsongkhapa is in the medium scope, but telling us to do the small scope. Teaching shared in common with. This is why it's so important. There's no buffet Buddhism that's going to work as a path to something. Lama Tsongkhapa is so clear right here. Now we're doing the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. Okay, start with the teachings for beings of small capacity, because that's the teaching of being of medium capacity. It's very interesting. If you strive to reject non-virtue and cultivate virtue through the standard practice of going for refuge and through reflection upon virtuous and non-virtuous karma and the certainty of their results, you will achieve a happy rebirth. Okay, small scope, all small scope. Now's the catch. Here comes Lama Tsongkhapa's however. It's funny. It should be like when I read it now, I hear Lama Tsongkhapa like super animated. He's like, yeah, that's all great. You need to do this. However, that's not enough. We're going to open your mind more now, folks. We're going to make it bigger. We're going to make your view a lot bigger than it was. You thought your view was huge, even though you had a cursory understanding of all of Buddhism before you got to the Lam Rim, hopefully. That's what the Lam Rim's designed for people who've heard Buddhism before. and, just didn't put it together or didn't know how to put it together exactly or need to learn how to put it together. There's an assumption that you have some kind of a foundation in understanding. But here, Lama Tsongkhapa is being very, very careful to bring us through in the exact stages that we need to, and show us how this buffet that we would do if we were just looking at a sutra isn't going to work for us. It's very specific in the order that we need to go in. However, do not be satisfied with this alone. Oh, there's more. Okay, well, I've heard there's more because I heard about the Four Noble Truths, where they said I could get a nirvana, and you haven't said I could do that in the small scope. We're just talking about like having a good rebirth so that we can be in a position to be able to get good stuff. Now we're saying like, okay, don't be satisfied with just good position, and I'm going to tell you why not now. Okay. Don't be satisfied with this. After you've developed the attitude of a person's of small capacity, develop the attitude that is shared with persons of medium capacity, namely disgust with all of cyclic existence. Now, these are very tough, strong words, being repulsed by. I heard Geshe Pende teaching the other night. He was trying to come up with more like disgusted adjectives, with what you would have if you had renunciation related to cyclic existence, related to what we would normally think is awesome. What would it be like? You'd be repulsed. You would think it stinks. You wouldn't want it. You would be disgusted by it. So namely, disgust with all of cyclic existence. On this basis, you may aspire to become a person of great capacity by developing the spirit of supreme enlightenment. So he's saying right here, if you don't get renunciation, you aren't going to get bodhicitta. It says, on this basis, so it's saying if you got to have a base to build, the next level. So there's got to be a base. So it's from this basis of disgust with cyclic existence that you can build bodhicitta. You become so anyway, consequently, you must train in an attitude of a person's of medium capacity. Why? Because even were you to reach the level of a deity or human, you would be mistaken if you believe this to be pleasurable by nature, since you would still have not escaped the suffering of conditionality, the pervasive compounded suffering. Therefore, in reality, you would have no happiness whatsoever. Your life would still come to a bad end, for you would surely fall into a miserable realm again. A human or a divine lifetime is like resting on a precipice just before falling into the abyss. So that's the first part that's a problem, Then there's the other problems of the suffering of change and suffering of suffering that we as humans have. But no matter where you are in cyclic existence, if you're at the peak of existence, you're still going to have to be thrust into another thing that probably isn't the peak of existence. So this is a flaw. This is a problem. No matter how happy you think you are, you will die. 100% you're going to die. Death will come and nothing can stop you. You don't know when you're going to die. And the only thing that can help you is Dharma, because when you get thrust into the next life, it's going to be your virtue and your non-virtue that's in your continuum that creates your new experience, suffering or happy. And if it's only virtue, it can only create happy. And that's what the Buddha has, only virtue, only wisdom. So only bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss. It says in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, after repeatedly coming to happy rebirths and experience much joy there, you die and fall into protracted and unbearable suffering of miserable realms. And then in Chandra Groman's letter to a student, you who whirl constantly in cyclic existence, yet who enter a happy realm, mistaking mere calm for happiness, will certainly wander helplessly through hundreds of like and unlike realms. So consequently, you have to become as thoroughly disenchanted with the happy realms as you are with the miserable realms. As Aryadeva's 400 stanzas says, high states frighten the wise. As much as hell, rare is the state of existence that does not terrify them. So holy beings look at this human basis we have as just as bad as being a maggot. Sees that all of these embodiments that we have that aren't pure are a problem and are just moving from suffering to suffering to suffering. Even though it appears that we can have states of happiness, those states of happiness go away and we move from suffering to suffering to suffering, even as a human. the highest happiness that we achieve has like a self-destruct mechanism in it. We know it does. We have to separate from the pleasant no matter what. Consequently, you have to become thoroughly disenchanted with the happy realms as you were with the miserable realms. We just read that. Also, the verse summary of the perfection of the wisdom in 8,000 lines says, those whose minds are attached to cyclic existence will continue to wander there constantly. So if you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you have no renunciation, you won't get to nirvana. So I'm only going to read the last little part here, and then we'll just end. From Chandra Groman's letter to a student. The more you conceive all beings as happy, the more dense the darkness of your delusion becomes. The more you conceive all beings as suffering, the more darkness of your delusion lessens. The more you contemplate what is pleasant, the more flames of attachment spread. The more you contemplate what is unpleasant, the more flames of attachment abate. From beginningless time, you have been conditioned to believe that the wonders of cyclic existence are sources of happiness, and you have habitually projected upon them a false image of beauty. But if you, as a remedy, you train yourself to meditate on suffering and unpleasantness, you will put an end to these wrong ideas. Chandra Groman says that if you neglect to meditate on these, ignorance and attachment will increase. And if you will continue to fuel the process of cyclic existence, hence it is vitally important to meditate on the faults of cyclic existence. And this is a freedom. This sounds like, oh, doom and gloom. I'll hate my life. No, 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 no. You'll love your life more than you ever could have loved your life, because you know that it's a basis from which you can have total freedom, total bliss, like that potential. Tomorrow morning, I can wake up and move closer to total bliss, total freedom. That's such a positive state of mind. But that positive state of mind is a wise state of mind that doesn't see things that are tricking us as not tricking us. So that with that, we'll end here. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. And that's the end of that's the end verse of Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika. So wonderful. We've heard the name Nagarjuna. Wow. He wrote some pretty tough stuff. So it's good that we heard the name of Chandrakirti. And it's good that we heard the name then of Tsongkhapa and heard the name of Khensur Geshe Wandak, because we only heard Nagarjuna and tried to, figure that out, that may be a problem. But because we have all these awesome commentaries, we have a shot. As this old gentleman I used to be friends with would say, older gentleman. I guess he probably was my age. It's funny I say that. He was exactly my age when I heard him say it. So this old guy like me said this thing. That's funny. It's funny how our minds don't really perceive ourselves correctly sometimes, and everything's other, I just caught myself in the midst of other, and non-self-awareness. It's just kind of funny. I'm sure we can all relate to that. The mandala offering, thank you for teaching. Thanksgiving for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. May Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings remain in this world for a very long time. And if I don't think I have it just right here. I wanted to read something else, but I don't want it to take up time because I want to. Oh, I found it. I'm just going to read the prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. It's not too long. And it was suggested that we read it by a great being. So let's read it. And Nejum Oracle said it's important to recite this. So prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. And I'll just read this quickly. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. When you were in the presence of Buddha Indraketa, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring. He made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish, that the lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. His pure view free of externity or destruction, eternity or destruction. His pure meditation cleansed of dark fading and fog. His pure conduct practiced according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning. Reverend, rightly applying it to himself. Good, dedicating it all for beings and doctrine. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Listening to the explanation of the three Pitakas, realized teachings, practicing of the three higher trainings, his skill and accomplishment and life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages of practice, he allied without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozong's teaching flourish. So you see the hearer vehicle and the two stages of Tantra being mentioned in the same stanza. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, heart essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. By the power of the oath-bound doctrine, protectors like the main guardians of the three beings paths, the quick-acting Lord, Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. In short, by lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of the power of its patrons, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by Vajrasattva's mantra, imagining Vajrasattva as inseparable from Kensur Geshe Wandak or your root guru, imagining that white light rays and nectars transform into white ohms and dissolve into us and purify our body. Red light rays and nectar transform into red ahs, and dissolve into our throat and purify our speech. Imagine blue light rays and nectars come down into our hearts, transform into hums and purify our minds. Om, ah, hum, white, red, blue, respectively. Om benza sato zamaya manupalaya benza sato zena vajita dida meva vazutagaya meva vazubukaya meva vahanuragda meva vazavazidi me pracha savakamazucha me kitam shriam kuru hum ha bhagavan zavadata benza mame moga benza vava mahazamaya zapa ahom ve. Paul and Lama will always protect us. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Jadajatun Jo Hung Jo Hung Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Vajadajatun Jo Hung Jo Hung Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Jadajatun Jo Hung Jo Hung Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Vajadajatun Jo Hung Jo Hung Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Jadajatun Jo Hung Jo Hung Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jigala Rajamo Rama Vajadajatun Jo Hung Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Dun Jo Gala Rajamo Rama Dunjo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Jo Rama Dunjo Kala Rajamo Rama Vajadaja Dunjo Rulu Honjo. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Now a prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. And now we'll do Kensur Geshe Wandak's prayer. So happy we have this now. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Kensur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food and music purified by Om, Ah, Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now the sound is stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. Remember to make this a personal practice. Remember to apply these things to your daily life. Remember to each day wake up and try to think about this human basis of leisure and opportunity and the fact that you can do something with it. You should take its essence and then recognize that it will end. So the time is now. So hopefully you got something from this talk. I know that it acquainted my mind with this material more. And I feel so fortunate to be able to do this week after week. So we'll see you all, some of you on Thursday. Thank you on all the different applications for your kind attention. I know it was a beautiful day today, so I hope you can get some fresh air, and let's talk soon. Thanks again.